The evolution and repeated reinvention of the Hemyock Castle site. Few records remain about the history of the site. Some records were sent to Exeter during World War II for safekeeping, but they were stored in a basement which was flooded in the Blitz. These sketches are deductions from available clues. In rural Devon, little is wasted, so the Hemyock Castle site has been repeatedly adapted and reinvented to suit changing needs of each era. Prehistory, about 500 BC. Hemyock was known as a place of summer water, something always highly valued by settlements. The castle site, combined with St Mary's Church site, makes a size and shape which are typical of early settlements, particularly with its reliable water supply. Something so precious as reliable water is likely to have been venerated. Romano-British period in about 150 AD. As well as farming and mineral extraction, there was iron smelting around Hemyock. Rather than a Roman villa, it is more likely that there was a Roman fort on the site. Previous historians remarked that the dimensions matched those of a Roman fort. It is likely that there was also an earlier Roman temporary marching fort stockade nearby, which later might have been reused as an animal enclosure. Roman forts were required to keep a year's worth of food in a substantial, well-built granary. Anglo-Saxon Hall in about 900 AD. Hemyock is recorded as a hunting estate. Many of the old Roman buildings would have crumbled. Perhaps the well-built Roman granary had survived better and was more suitable for reuse as an Anglo-Saxon hall. Norman wooden tower in about 1080 AD. After the 1066 Norman conquest, the new owners would have built a wooden defensive tower quickly, possibly next to the old Anglo-Saxon hall. Norman stone tower in about 1120 AD. In time, the old wooden tower would have been replaced by a more substantial and more permanent stone tower, probably adjacent to the old Anglo-Saxon hall. The site would have had stronger defences, including a stone wall. Later, this evolved into a fortified manor house with a great hall. The site is recorded during the 13th century as a court. As times and fashions changed, it became a hall house, with at least one solar above the hall for the lord and important guests. There were service rooms beyond the cross or screens passage. This layout was probably largely retained when the fortified manor house became a castle. Parts seem to have been absorbed or replaced by the new castle defences, especially by the massive eastern gatehouse. Hemyock Castle 1380. In 1380, King Richard II granted the Asthorpes a license to crenellate their fortified manor house by building a wall of stone and lime. This was the heyday of Hemyock Castle, with its defences and great hall. Hemyock Castle Farm in 1980. Hemyock Castle was slighted, destroyed during the 1660s after the English Civil War. The manor house was probably also badly damaged during and after the fighting. Much of the stone was sold for building or used for castle farm buildings. St Mary's Brook, which had flowed through the castle's eastern moat, was diverted into its present course, closer to the churchyard. The eastern moat was filled in for use as a farmyard. The new owners of the site converted the ruins into a farmhouse and farm. Inside the manor house, particularly in the roof, there are traces of earlier phases, including smoke-blackened beams from the open fire in the old Great Hall, fragments of medieval plaster ceilings, and the way that the later chimney stacks were cut into the Great Hall. Woodwork shows traces of the old solars and of the cross or screens passage. As fashions changed, more first-floor rooms were added. There were inglenooks with bread ovens and a dairy at the north end of the building. General Simcoe, who bought Hemyock and the castle site during the late 18th century, wanted to restore the castle to its former glory. Before his untimely death in 1806, he added Gothic features to the manor house and the impressive granite door archway he obtained from Cornwall. He also added upper stories to the two former guardhouses, the bastions which had protected the outer end of the eastern drawbridge. The site and manor house later returned to being a tenanted farm. The southern end, under the old stone tower, became a cider cellar for commercial production of farm cider. The castle site continued as a farm and woodworking business until about the 1970s, by which time it was largely derelict and needed major repairs. At this time, parts of the western moat were filled in. During the 1980s, the castle site was sold again, triggering the mammoth project to convert the manor house into a home, conserve the ruins, convert outbuildings into homes, and open the site to visitors. These never-ending tasks continue. How will future generations adapt this historic house and site?